The wind, a ghost of a whisper across the desolate plains, was the only sound that truly belonged to the outside world. Here, where the sun beat down with indifferent cruelty and the horizon shimmered with heat haze, stood CECOT. Not merely a prison, but a monument to despair, a fortress forged from human fear and the cold, unyielding will to contain the untamable. It was a jagged scar on the earth, its obsidian walls rising like a silent, oppressive block of reinforced durasteel and fortified concrete, devoid of windows or any visible means of entry. A silent sentinel guarding its terrible secrets. No perimeter fences, no watchtowers in the conventional sense. Instead, an invisible web of electromagnetic fields hummed constantly, detectable only by sophisticated scanners. Below the surface, seismic sensors could differentiate a crawling insect from a burrowing machine. Overhead, silent drones patrolled fixed, overlapping circuits, their sensors feeding directly into central command. To approach CECOT unannounced was to invite immediate, overwhelming response. To escape was an impossibility. It housed the architects of global chaos, individuals whose freedom threatened civilization. They were locked away, not just from the world, but from hope itself, in CECOT, the world's most secure prison. The armored transport vehicle designated Cerberus 5 was less a vehicle and more a mobile vault. It sliced through the desert, kicking up plumes of dust. Inside, strapped rigidly into a reinforced seat, was Kale. His reputation, a dark shadow, preceded him. A tactical genius, master of deception, responsible for orchestrating the downfall of governments and financial markets. He could turn an empty room into a weapon, and now he was being delivered to the one place engineered to neutralize his unique brilliance. His eyes, the color of deep-sea ice, scanned the interior of the transport with almost bored detachment, missing nothing. He noted the precise angle of the internal cameras, the subtle hum of internal dampeners, the disciplined posture of the two heavily armed guards flanking him. They wore standard CECOT uniform, matte gray, reinforced Kevlar, with biometric interfaces. No names, no faces, just extensions of the system. Kale permitted himself a small, almost imperceptible smirk. He understood systems. He excelled at breaking them. The vehicle slowed, then stopped with a soft hydraulic sigh. A colossal gate, indistinguishable from the surrounding wall, retracted with a low groan, revealing a cavernous entryway. Not an open arch, but a series of interconnected airlocks, each cycling through independent sequences. This was the mouth of Cerberus, swallowing Kale. Once inside, the process was relentless, clinical, designed to strip away possessions, then identity. Kale was led through sterile corridors of polished steel, the air cool and faintly metallic. Every step was monitored, every gesture recorded. He underwent a full-body scan, then the disintegration shower, a sonic and chemical bath purging any contaminants. His clothes were incinerated. He was issued a simple gray jumpsuit, devoid of pockets or seams. Inmate 726, a synthesized, genderless voice echoed from unseen speakers. You are now officially designated. Kale felt no tremor of fear, only a keen, almost academic interest. He was processed, numbered, cataloged, another cog in the impossibly complex machine of CECOT. He was eventually led to his cell, a small, stark cube of concrete and steel. A single integrated bunk, a toilet, a small table. No windows, just a smooth, impenetrable wall. The air was circulated, filtered, tasteless. The light was constant, diffuse, designed to eliminate shadows and obscure time. The door slid shut behind him with an undeniable thud. He stood in the center of the room, ran a hand over the smooth, unyielding wall. It felt solid, impenetrable. Yet Kale's gaze held a flicker, a silent promise. Every system had a vulnerability. He would find CECOT's.
The massive, blast-proof gates of CECOT were not merely barriers. They were the first, most unforgiving handshake with oblivion. From the distant, shimmering heat haze, the approaching armored transport, its tires crunching on the sun-baked gravel, seemed to shrink against the sheer scale of the fortress. Inside, Officer Kale felt the familiar tremor of unease, a sensation far beyond the rumble of the vehicle. He wasn't new to the correction system, but CECOT was a different beast entirely. His transfer papers had been brief, his training even briefer, a stark contrast to the exhaustive vetting process. The transport slowed, then halted before the first gate, a monolithic slab of reinforced steel that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. A low, guttural hum vibrated through the chassis as scanners, hidden within the walls, meticulously analyzed every inch of the vehicle. There was no visible guard, no shouted command, just the mechanical sigh of airlocks engaging and disengaging. After a tense minute, a small red light above the gate blinked green, and with a groan that echoed the land's own ancient lament, the massive structure began to recede into the wall. This was the no man's land, a barren strip of gravel and automated turrets, leading to a second identical gate. Cale's gaze swept over the meticulously maintained yet utterly desolate landscape. Every detail, from the precise angle of the razor wire to the hidden thermal imaging cameras that track the smallest insect, screamed impenetrable. He knew CECOT didn't just deter escape, it rendered the very thought of it obsolete. The second gate opened with the same slow, deliberate ceremony, revealing not an inner courtyard, but a vast, shadowed hangar, its ceiling lost in the gloom. The air here was colder, sterile, carrying the faint scent of ozone and disinfectant. The transport drove into the belly of the beast, where it was met by a squad of guards, their faces impassive behind advanced helmets, their movements synchronized with chilling precision. They weren't just security, they were an extension of CECOT's will. Cale, along with 2 other new recruits, was escorted out. His eyes, accustomed to the harsh glare of the outside, struggled to adjust to the dim, artificially lit interior. Corridors of polished concrete stretched into dizzying perspectives, punctuated by heavy, sealed doors. The silence was profound, broken only by the soft, rhythmic hum of unseen machinery and the measured footsteps of the guards. It was the sound of ultimate control. A senior officer, Warden Rourke, a man whose gaze was as sharp and unyielding as the prison's architecture, met them. His uniform was immaculate, his posture ramrod straight. "Welcome to CECOT, officers." Rourke's voice was a low, even cadence, devoid of warmth. "You are no longer in the outside world. Here, the rules are absolute. Discipline is paramount. You are a cog in the machine, a vital one. Your duty is simple. Keep the worst of humanity from ever seeing the sun again." He paused, his eyes swept over each new recruit, lingering for a fraction longer on Cale. "Officer Cale, you are assigned to Block C, Level 3. Report to Sergeant Thorne. Do not deviate. Do not question. Do your job." With that chilling directive, Cale was led deeper into the labyrinth, the reality of CECOT settling upon him like a shroud. Cold, heavy, and utterly inescapable. The crunching of gravel beneath the tires grew into a thunderous roar as the armored transport finally reached the colossal gates. These weren't mere iron, but composite alloys laced with ceramics and polymers designed to withstand not just brute force, but shaped charges and kinetic penetrators. The driver, a figure swallowed by the anonymity of his ballistic helmet, brought the hulking vehicle to a precise halt before the monolithic slab of steel. For a moment, an eerie silence descended, broken only by the low hum of the transport's engine and the distant, almost imagined whisper of the wind Cale had heard from within the sound-dampened confines. Then, with a groan that seemed to reverberate from the very bedrock of the world, the gates began to part. It was a glacial movement, heavy pneumatic pistons hissing as the 2 massive sections peeled inward, revealing not freedom, but a further, deeper maw. The opening revealed a vast, cavernous sallyport, a concrete tunnel lined with the same dull, blast-resistant material, illuminated by an unforgiving, cold white light that reflected off every surface. There were no windows, no natural light, only the stark reality of CECOT's initial embrace. The transport rumbled forward, its passage an insignificant speck swallowed by the immensity. As it cleared the threshold, the gates behind it began their agonizingly slow return, sealing off the outside world with a finality that felt absolute. Cale, strapped into a specially designed, heavily padded chair in the rear of the transport, barely flinched. His wrists and ankles were secured with advanced magnetic cuffs, and a thick collar ensured his head movements were limited. His eyes, however, moved with an almost predatory keenness, absorbing every detail. He was a man accustomed to control, to seeing the angles, to finding the weaknesses. But here, within CECOT's initial layer, he found only unyielding strength. Even Cale, architect of devastating cyber attacks that had crippled nations and mastermind behind financial heists that had made cartels weep with envy, felt a prickle of something unfamiliar. Not fear precisely, but a profound respect for the absolute nature of his predicament. He had always believed every lock had a key, every wall a breach point. CECOT seemed designed to scoff at such philosophies. Ahead, another set of identical, impenetrable gates loomed, positioned perhaps 50 meters down the sallyport. Along the polished concrete walls, recessed laser grids flickered to life, and automated turrets, silent sentinels of advanced design, swiveled almost imperceptibly, their optical sensors tracking the transport's every inch. High above, through a reinforced glass panel, Cale caught a fleeting glimpse of faces, guards, their expressions as unreadable as the fortified walls around them. They wore dark, tactical gear, carrying weapons that looked more like compact pieces of art than instruments of suppression. The transport came to another halt in the center of the antechamber, equidistant from the now closed outer gates and the still closed inner ones. The engine cut out, plunging the interior into a sudden, amplified silence, broken only by the faint hum of the vehicle's auxiliary systems. It was a silence that pressed down, a physical weight. Cale drew a slow, steady breath. This wasn't a game. This was the end of the line, even for him. He had spent his life outsmarting systems, but CECOT was less a system and more a state of being, an inescapable, unyielding void. The inner gates, dark and imposing, waited patiently to swallow him whole. The colossal gates, far from swinging inward with a traditional groan, began a complex ballet of mechanized power. A low, grinding hum vibrated through the very ground, growing in intensity as immense hydraulic pistons, thicker than ancient tree trunks, engaged deep within their housings. Panels of the formidable alloy began to retract, not horizontally, but vertically, sliding upwards with excruciating slowness into unseen recesses within the monstrous wall itself. The process was deafening, a symphony of tortured metal and compressed air, a sound designed to instill dread and diminish hope. The scale was overwhelming, each rising section revealing more of the internal structure of the wall, hinting at layers of reinforcement and interwoven protective technologies. A narrow, temporary aperture, barely wide enough for the transport, revealed itself first. Beyond it, not freedom, but another equally imposing wall, set back perhaps 50 meters, waited patiently. This was the antechamber, the psychological gauntlet before the true maw of CECOT. The driver of the armored transport, a man whose face was etched with the weary resignation common to those who ferry souls to this particular hell, edged the behemoth vehicle forward. The crunch of gravel under its heavy tires was now amplified, echoing eerily between the two formidable barriers, each reverberation a dull drumbeat accompanying the descent into utter containment. The moment the transport cleared the first gate, the retraction sequence reversed. With the same glacial, ear-splitting drone, the alloy panels descended, sealing the outside world once more, severing the last tangible link to any semblance of freedom. The air within the antechamber felt immediately heavier, denser, as if the very atoms were pressed down by the immense security. High above, on the inner face of the now sealed gate, automated turrets, silent sentinels of death, pivoted almost imperceptibly, their optical lenses sweeping the confined space. Laser grids, invisible to the naked eye, but registered by the transport's internal sensors, hummed into life, crisscrossing the space in an intricate, deadly web, forming an impassable barrier of pure energy. A voice, synthesized and devoid of human warmth, broadcast through external speakers embedded in the inner wall. Vehicle ID confirmed. Proceed to checkpoint Gamma. The metallic resonance of the voice seemed to strip the very air of warmth, leaving only an artificial chill. The transport moved forward, traversing the short, barren stretch of fortified concrete that constituted the antechamber. On either side, the walls rose sheer and smooth, offering no handhold, no crevice, nothing but an unbroken expanse of reinforcement material. This was not a place built for escape, but for absolute containment, a brutal testament to human ingenuity applied to restriction. As the transport neared the second wall, its surface, unlike the first gate, remained stubbornly monolithic. No visible seams, no obvious points of entry, just an unyielding, oppressive expanse of gray. It simply was, a final, unbreachable statement. Then, with a sudden surge of blinding multi-spectrum light, an array of powerful scanners flickered to life, bathing the entire transport. Beams of various spectra, thermal imaging, X-rays, magnetic resonance, terahertz radiation, washed over the armored vehicle, probing its every inch, penetrating even its reinforced hull. It was an exhaustive, non-invasive search for anything illicit, anything out of place, anything that defied CECOT's meticulous order, down to the very atomic structure. Inside the transport, the faint hum of the scanners was almost lost beneath the engine's idle, but the passengers, unseen and unheard, would undoubtedly be acutely aware of the intense scrutiny,
feeling every pulse of energy penetrate their confines. Their journey to oblivion was only just beginning, and each layer of CECOT's defense hammered that truth home with chilling finality.
The grinding hum reached a crescendo, a mechanical sigh of immense power, before slowly, deliberately, fading into a deep thrum. The colossal gates, having completed their intricate dance, now stood fully retracted, not swung open, but seamlessly absorbed into the reinforced walls themselves. Where once had been an impenetrable barrier of composite alloys, there was now a gaping maw, a shadowed tunnel leading deeper into the heart of CECOT. The air, heavy with the scent of ozone and chilled metal, seemed to cling to the armored transport as it began its slow, deliberate crawl forward. The tires, which had crunched defiantly on the sun-baked gravel outside, now rolled silently over a polished, dark gray surface that appeared less like concrete and more like solidified obsidian. The sheer thickness of the walls flanking this entryway was staggering, easily 40 feet deep, revealing layers of embedded reinforcement grids, fiber optics, and conduits that pulsed with faint internal light. It wasn't just a gate, it was a layered defense system unto itself, a testament to the obsessive minds who had conceived this place. As the transport edged deeper, the searing sunlight of the desolate plains was abruptly swallowed, replaced by an artificial, clinical luminescence emanating from recessed strips in the ceiling. The tunnel wasn't merely a passage, it was a sophisticated decontamination and scanning chamber. Lasers, fine as spider silk, crisscrossed the air ahead, invisible to the naked eye but undoubtedly registering every micrometric detail of the vehicle. Magnetic resonance sensors hummed beneath the floor, scanning for concealed explosives or unauthorized materials with an unseen, probing intensity. Overhead, massive automated turrets, retracted flush with the ceiling, subtly swiveled their multi-barreled muzzles, their dark lenses tracking the transport's every millimeter of progress. This was the no-man zone, a name whispered by the few who understood CECOT's layout, a lethal trap designed to eliminate any intruder who miraculously breached the outer gates. There were no human guards visible here, only the silent, omnipresent watchfulness of the machines. The air itself felt monitored, sterile and cold, carrying the weight of absolute control. The occupants of the transport, likely hardened security personnel or perhaps a new inmate, would be acutely aware of the dozens of ways this sterile tunnel could become their tomb. The tunnel stretched for what felt like an eternity, perhaps half a mile, before opening into a vast, cavernous space. This was not the exterior of a building, but an immense subterranean antechamber. Dominating the center of this chamber was another, even more formidable barrier, a titanic circular blast door, emblazoned with the stark angular logo of CECOT. It dwarfed the transport, a monolithic disc of reinforced steel and unknown alloys, perfectly flush with the surrounding wall. High above, a dizzying array of catwalks, surveillance domes, and robotic sentries created a dizzying web. The air here was heavy, still, punctuated only by the low thrumming of unseen machinery and the distant, almost imperceptible echo of the wind outside, now a mere memory. The transport slowed, then came to a complete stop before the second ultimate gate. The real prison, the true heart of CECOT, lay beyond.
The massive armored transport, a lumbering behemoth of steel and hardened composite, began to move again. With a low, guttural growl from its engines, it rumbled forward, crossing the threshold where the colossal outer gates had once stood. The world outside, a vast expanse of shimmering heat haze and desolate plains, vanished behind it with an almost palpable sense of finality. This was the true entrance, the point of no return. Immediately, the atmosphere shifted. The air inside the initial security zone of CECOT was colder, denser, imbued with a sterile, metallic scent that hinted at ozone and machine oil. They weren't in an open courtyard, as might be expected, but a colossal, dimly lit antechamber carved deep within the perimeter wall itself. The ceiling, lost in shadow far above, seemed to press down, while the walls, an uninterrupted expanse of dark, polished concrete, offered no windows, no relief, only an impenetrable blankness. It was a space designed to disorient and overwhelm, a brutalist embrace of absolute control. Hundreds of unblinking optical sensors, tiny red eyes embedded in the concrete, tracked the transport's every millimeter of progress. They weren't just cameras. Some pulsed with an invisible light, scanning for everything from biological signatures to hidden frequencies. The air, though seemingly still, thrummed with the silent operation of unseen machinery, ventilation systems filtering every particle, electromagnetic fields subtly humming, a symphony of invisible forces designed to detect, deter, and destroy any deviation. The transport continued its slow, deliberate crawl across the expanse of reinforced concrete. The only sound was the muted groan of its suspension and the rhythmic crunch of its tires, amplified by the enclosed space. There were no guards visible, no human presence to greet them, only the chilling impression of omnipresent watchfulness. It felt less like entering a building and more like being swallowed whole by a meticulously engineered organism. After what felt like an eternity, but was likely only a few minutes, the transport came to a halt. It was positioned precisely in the center of the antechamber, directly before another formidable barrier. This one wasn't a gate, but a colossal, seamless slab of the same dark concrete that comprised the walls, stretching from floor to an invisible ceiling. It looked utterly immovable, like a section of the very earth ripped from its foundations and set in place. Above the slab, a single harsh white light flickered on, illuminating a digital display. For a moment, the screen remained blank, a silent judge awaiting its verdict. Then, stark white letters coalesced against the black background, chillingly clear. Identification required, authorization pending. The sudden illumination, the stark message, broke the oppressive silence with a jolt. It was a stark reminder that even having passed the exterior gates, they were still merely at the periphery of CECOT's true complexity. This was not the end of the journey, but merely the next layer of an infinitely nested Russian doll of security. The true heart of the prison, where the worst criminals were kept, remained shrouded by layers of technology, concrete, and unyielding vigilance, each more daunting than the last. The air thickened with unspoken tension, awaiting the next mechanical command, the next unforgiving step deeper into the fortress of despair.
The air changed inside the outer perimeter, growing heavier, colder, despite the scorching sun still beating down from above. The vast expanse the armored transport now traversed was not merely a void, but a meticulously engineered no-man's land, stretching for several hundred meters between the colossal outer walls and what appeared to be an equally formidable inner structure. The ground here was not the sun-baked gravel of the approach road, but a seamless, dark gray composite material, almost glassy in its smoothness, designed to offer no purchase for anything other than approved vehicles. Above, the sky was a relentless blue, but at ground level, the oppressive presence of CECOT was absolute. Every few dozen meters, sleek, metallic obelisks rose from the ground, their surfaces bristling with an array of unseen sensors, thermal, acoustic, kinetic, and countless others designed to detect the slightest anomaly. Invisible beams of energy, silent and pervasive, constantly swept the zone, mapping every molecule, every gust of wind, every dust mote. No bird dared to fly this far in, no insect could burrow unseen. This was a sterile, monitored purgatory, an overt statement of total control. The armored transport, its powerful engines now purring at a lower, more cautious register, continued its deliberate crawl across this exposed plain. The journey, though short in distance, felt interminable. Each meter covered an affirmation of the prison's impenetrable will. The windows, thick and dark, revealed nothing to any hypothetical occupants within the transport, but from the outside, the vehicle seemed to shrink, dwarfed by the sheer, unyielding scale of its surroundings. In the distance, the true face of CECOT began to emerge, not just another wall, but a gargantuan, monolithic edifice that seemed to erupt from the very earth. This was the heart of the fortress, a structure of obsidian dark material that absorbed the sunlight rather than reflecting it, giving it a menacing, almost predatory aura. Unlike the outer perimeter, which had presented a relatively smooth, albeit imposing face, this inner wall was a complex tapestry of interlocking panels, reinforced seams, and subtle, almost imperceptible projections that hinted at a deeper, more aggressive defense system. As the transport drew closer, the ground beneath it began to subtly shift, not tectonically, but mechanically. A series of faint green lights began to illuminate along the edge of the smooth gray composite, tracing a path that led directly to a cavernous opening in the base of the inner wall. This was not a gate in the conventional sense, but a perfectly square aperture, devoid of any visible hinges or seams, as if it had been carved out of the very rock by a force beyond human comprehension. Without a sound other than the continued low hum of its engines, the transport began to descend into the ground, following the glowing green path. It was a ramp, steep and meticulously engineered, leading down into what promised to be yet another layer of CECOT's suffocating embrace. The colossal inner wall loomed larger, darker, and the sense of finality grew with every inch the transport sank beneath the surface.
The world above, with its indifferent sun and ghost wind, was rapidly fading from view, replaced by the silent, unyielding depths of CECOT. The true welcome, the real surrender, was only just beginning.
The behemoth transport, a defiant speck against the indifferent sky, continued its slow, ponderous crawl across the no man's land. The air, indeed, had taken on a peculiar chill, a sharp contrast to the scorching exterior, as if the very atmosphere within CECOT's confines was manufactured, designed to strip away comfort and instill a perpetual unease. Here, the meticulously raked gravel, stretching for what felt like an eternity, was not merely decorative. It was a calibrated surface, sensitive to the slightest deviation. Each crunch beneath the heavy tires sent ripples through unseen ground sensors, a silent chorus of confirmation broadcast to the omnipresent watchtowers that now loomed with chilling clarity in the distance. These towers, unlike any conventional guard posts, were sleek obsidian monoliths, their surfaces absorbing the brutal sunlight rather than reflecting it. They offered no visible windows or obvious platforms for human sentinels. Instead, a myriad of apertures, tiny and inscrutable, dotted their facades: lens arrays, thermal scanners, sonic emitters, and perhaps far more exotic technologies, all humming with an undetectable vigilance. Every centimeter of the transport's slow progression was under their cold, unblinking gaze, dissected and catalogued with an almost surgical precision. The silence itself was a weapon, broken only by the rhythmic thrum of the transport's engines and the insistent crunch of gravel, each sound amplified by the sheer absence of any other. The no man's land revealed further horrors of its design. Irregularly spaced across the desolate expanse were what appeared to be innocuous metallic plates, flush with the ground, yet the air above them shimmered faintly, betraying powerful, localized energy fields, calibrated to disrupt electronics, disorient intruders, or, if activated to full capacity, vaporize anything foolish enough to trespass without authorization. These weren't overt defensives, they were passive deterrents, a constant debilitating pressure on the psyche, a reminder that every step taken within CECOT was a step into a meticulously crafted trap. After what felt like an age, the transport approached another formidable barrier, dwarfing even the previous outer gates. This was the true threshold, the entrance to the labyrinthine heart of CECOT itself. It wasn't a singular gate, but a vast, multi-layered structure, a segmented wall of segmented walls, each section thicker than the last, a composite of steel, reinforced concrete, and an almost organic-looking crystalline lattice that seemed to pulse with suppressed energy. Towering above it, stretching into the hazy sky, was a massive archway, devoid of any ornamentation, a gaping maw of absolute security. Unlike the smooth, seamless retraction of the outer gates, this inner perimeter hinted at a different kind of access. Instead of hydraulic pistons, immense electromagnetic locks, visible as colossal polished iron clamps, held sections of the wall in place, their power lines thick as a man's arm disappearing into the stone. The sheer weight of this final barrier was palpable, a suffocating presence that promised permanent confinement. The armored transport slowed, its engines rumbling to a near idle, before coming to a complete stop directly before the archway. The air grew even colder, the silence deeper, as if the prison itself held its breath, ready to swallow its latest offering whole. Inside the formidable vehicle, the subtle vibration of its powerful engine ceased, replaced by a profound stillness that resonated with the unyielding finality of CECOT. The only sound was the faint, high-pitched whine of unseen power sources within the colossal structure ahead, a prelude to the next inevitable phase of entry.
The behemoth transport, now a solitary, defiant speck against the indifferent sky, continued its slow, ponderous crawl across the no man's land. The peculiar chill in the air, a stark, almost painful contrast to the searing heat outside, intensified with every meter traversed. It wasn't merely temperature, it was a pervasive coldness that seemed to leach the warmth from the very metal of the transport, an oppressive sensation that pressed against the thick, reinforced windows and seeped into the marrow of anyone observing from within. This wasn't merely an open expanse, it was a meticulously engineered dead zone, a testament to CECOT's unwavering commitment to absolute isolation. Every few dozen meters,
perfectly camouflaged panels, indistinguishable from the sun-baked ground, subtly shifted. From these hidden apertures, the polished lenses of automated sentry guns silently emerged, tracking the transport with an almost predatory precision before retracting, their threat lingering in the air. Beneath the gravel, a web of seismic and magnetic sensors detected every tremor, every metallic signature. Overhead, unseen drones patrolled, their silent hum a constant, almost subliminal reminder of omnipresent surveillance. The no man's land was not just a deterrent, it was an execution chamber, primed and ready, its silence more terrifying than any alarm. The transport's powerful engines, usually a source of reassuring might, now seemed muted, almost subservient to the oppressive atmosphere. Inside the prisoner compartment, a profound, chilling silence had settled, broken only by the rhythmic thrum of the vehicle's hydraulics and the shallow breathing of its occupants. Even the most hardened among them, accustomed to defiance, felt the weight of this desolate expanse. This wasn't just a physical barrier, it was a psychological assault, eroding hope with every glacial meter. The air, though cold, felt thick, heavy with the implied threat of unseen systems, of a fortress that breathed and thought and watched without human intervention. As the hundreds of meters dissolved behind them, another colossal structure began to materialize out of the shimmering heat haze, even more imposing than the outer gates. It was a monolith of dark, obsidian-like material, rising straight from the plains, completely devoid of seams or visible entrances. This was the second layer of CECOT's impenetrable shell, the final, most absolute barrier before the inner sanctum. The no man's land terminated abruptly at its base, leaving no path but directly towards its intimidating, featureless face. The behemoth transport slowed even further, its tires grinding almost imperceptibly as it prepared for the ultimate test of entry. This wasn't just another gate, it was the mouth of the abyss.
The behemoth transport, now a solitary, defiant speck against the indifferent sky, continued its slow, ponderous crawl across the no man's land. The peculiar chill in the air, a stark, almost painful contrast to the searing heat outside, intensified with every meter traversed. It wasn't merely a drop in temperature, it felt like the very air was being siphoned of all warmth, all life, becoming thin and metallic, a manufactured atmosphere designed to disorient and oppress. The vast expanse, deceptively empty, was in fact a meticulously monitored kill zone, laced with unseen sensors and automated defenses, each humming with a silent, deadly readiness. Then, emerging from the shimmering haze at the far end of the no man's land, another barrier materialized. This was not merely another set of gates, but a colossal, windowless edifice, a sheer wall of reinforced obsidian dark composite, stretching impossibly high, curving subtly to suggest it was part of a larger, impenetrable ring. It seemed to grow from the very earth, an organic extension of the rock and steel, mocking any notion of escape or even entry without absolute permission. No seams were visible, no obvious points of weakness, just an unbroken, terrifying monument to finality. The transport's engines, which had maintained their low, guttural growl, now seemed to falter slightly, as if even the machine itself recognized the immense challenge this new barrier represented. The crunch of gravel beneath its tires became more subdued, the sound swallowed by the oppressive silence that radiated from the looming wall. Slowly, agonizingly, the vehicle approached, the chill in the air now an icy grip, seeping into the very core of the transport, an unseen, pervasive presence. As it drew closer, details began to resolve from the monolithic facade. Microscopic lenses, almost invisible to the naked eye, dotted the surface like unblinking, predatory eyes. They swiveled in silent unison, their unseen beams undoubtedly scanning every inch of the approaching behemoth, cataloging its every characteristic, verifying its every authorized signature. This was the true face of CECOT, not just physical strength, but an intelligence network that left no shadow unexamined, no detail unchecked. Finally, with a soft, almost reverent hiss of pneumatic brakes, the armored transport shuddered to a halt. It rested barely 50 meters from the face of the impossibly smooth, dark wall. The engines died, not abruptly, but with a mournful sigh,
leaving behind an echoing silence broken only by the faint, almost imperceptible thrum of the wall itself, a low-frequency vibration that resonated deep within the chest. It was the sound of immense, dormant power, patiently awaiting its next command. No voice hailed them, no guard appeared. There was only the absolute, unyielding presence of the wall, its surface reflecting the indifferent sun in a way that seemed to absorb light rather than bounce it back. The occupants of the transport, unseen and unheard, were now truly within CECOT's grasp. The journey had ended, and the true immensity of their new, unescapable reality had just begun to unfold. They were inside the first ironclad skin of the world's most secure prison, a place designed to ensure that no one ever left.